Hey, producer Paul here. The following is a presentation that Pat gave at a recent mastermind. For more information, check out wealthygymowners.com.
So I want to talk with you about focus. The title of the presentation is Focus Finder, and it's getting to that kind of $30,000 to $40,000 a month mark or beyond. And I think it probably dovetails pretty well with some of the stuff Doug talked about. I see so many people in our ecosystem get stuck in that kind of 10 to 15 range, or maybe if they're in a metropolitan area, sometimes it's more that 15 to 20 range. But usually it's not because they don't have access to stuff. It's not because they don't periodically do the right things. It's usually they just aren't focused and consistent with the things that they need to be doing to get the outcomes they want. So I'm going to talk through kind of the 4 buckets or focus areas that we have and give you a couple fixes and even share a couple little GPT tools that you can use to maybe make some of this consistency easier. So the first is the connect unit. And we've talked at length about that. Do you have a clear front end offer? Do you have something, ideally a free experience? I'm very consistently an advocate of some sort of free experience. 7-day, 14-day, if you happen to do one-on-one, then it can certainly be a couple sessions. But I think that the way that people in our industry have historically thought about qualifying people is very short-sighted, very myopic. I think that you have the things that hold most people back are not necessarily rooted in their financial status. And on the surface level, we may think that, right? But they spend money all the time. I mean, some people went out to dinner or Drake's or whatever last night. There are plenty of people who dropped over $100 there in an evening, right? So they'll spend money on things that they value. But it's so hard, and it's harder than it's ever been, I believe, to convey value without experience. Because now people pay less attention. There are more things vying for their attention. So getting them through your door kind of gives you a little bit of a captive audience, right? So if you don't have that kind of experience in place, and if you are not disseminating it everywhere you possibly can, that's an opportunity. So when we think about focus, I think Doug yesterday mentioned, hey, I would want my trial, my information everywhere in my town, everywhere in my community. I think that having something that you're like, hey, if I can get somebody through the door, which is such a common phrase, man, if I can just get them in here, most of them stay. Most of them, I close most of them, whatever the way you describe it would look like. Well, let's get more people through the door. That doesn't mean that some of them are not going to match up financially, especially if you're a premium price service. But the odds of you being able to demonstrate enough value that they're willing to invest go up pretty substantially if they get 45 minutes, an hour with you, or multiple hours with you over multiple days. The idea that we're devaluing what we do with something like that, I think, is just absolutely silly. How could you demonstrate more value than through experience? You certainly aren't going to be able to demonstrate nearly as much value through a Facebook ad, through a social media post, not even a fraction as much as spending an hour with you. I've talked about this in other presentations, like branding and conversion and time spent with your brand. This is kind of that. And I mentioned it yesterday. You being in the room, we get a whole lot better chance of having your attention when we were talking about onboarding. You being in the room if we say something, there's a better chance that's going to stick than if we just happen to mention in a sentence in an email or on a social media post. So that's number one. The second thing with the Connect unit is having a simple paid ad strategy. And I say simple if you're running it or invest with somebody to run ads. We've kind of entered an era where I think that for a business to be sustainably healthy, ads are not optional. Trust me, I did every grassroots thing that somebody could do with the gym. At various points, I've made lists of all the different marketing tactics that we tried, and the number probably reached upwards of, the first post I made was 107, and I started to think of other ones that I had forgotten about. I mean, you name it, standing in front of Walmart, testing people's body fat, all the way up to car wraps. I mean, anything that I thought would work. You laugh at the Walmart when I signed up 19 people that day. I signed up 19 people for a pre-sale. But as the landscape evolves, so much of the stuff I just talked about with attention becomes harder to get. And so the two, I think, areas of greatest opportunity are local grassroots marketing, where you're actually getting out face-to-face with people, because most of your franchise competitors will be pretty mediocre at that at best. It's just not part of most franchise models because it's not as easy to scale. It's not as easy to systemize, right? It actually takes somebody having some people skills and some determination and drive. And franchises historically try to build around for lack of a better way of putting it, lowest common denominator employee, right? They want the systems, the technology, the equipment to do most of the work. And that doesn't play into that. So you'll see some do a little bit, but they're rarely going to be great at it. They're rarely going to be consistent with it. So there's an opportunity there. And then with ads, if we think about what we're trying to accomplish on a social media platform, we're trying to get a message out and get distribution of that message. Well, the more stuff in the feed, the more people doing things, the harder it is to get consistent distribution. So really, I just think of ads as just consistently magnified distribution. And it's just not going to be easy to get enough distribution with the way the social media landscape is headed without putting some money on that stuff. And then beyond that, I think some of the weekly organic outreach, organic posting, lead magnets, referral asks, you have to have a consistent way to do this weekly. And when I talk about all of this, this focus finder is, if you're not going to do it consistently, you shouldn't expect it to do well. I know Doug referenced the gift baskets, and it's kind of laughable when somebody says, well, I sent out 10 messages, I didn't get something. I put out a basket. I made this post and I didn't get anything. I sent an email. That makes as much sense to me logically as a client coming to you after their first day of training and being really mad they didn't lose 20 pounds. It's the same thing, right? Any meaningful desired outcome is going to be a product of consistent effort. So weekly organic outreach and posts, lead magnets, referral asks. Obviously, I'm an advocate of a book. The lead magnet that we run right now is the Wealthy Gym Owner book. I ran the Fitness Entrepreneur Handbook for about 8 years nonstop. I love books for a number of reasons. They still have maybe not the same type of authority that they had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when it was more labor intensive to get a book out, but most of the people in your market will not have their own book. So that's a differentiator, right? Like, so that it's an authority tool. And typically the way that somebody is going to create a book, it's got a little bit longer shelf life, right? Like there's a little more length in the utility of it than most of the things that people run ads to. Like I said, I ran one for 8 years, and I think we could probably go put that thing back out there now and it would do okay. We've seen a lot of people do well with an info packet. I think the info packet idea is pretty simple. People are curious. They want to know information. They don't want to talk to somebody a lot of the time. And so I don't think that being evasive and vague about the information about your business, whether it's the range of prices or whatever else, is a good idea. But I do think that you don't want prices to just be judged in a vacuum. Like, you want the ability to create value that meets or exceeds the prices that you're charging. So have them download an info packet. You can talk about all the success stories you have. You can talk about why your training approach is different and better than the alternative options. You can talk about your range of prices and any number of other things. But info packets, I think, they check a lot of boxes, right? Like, people don't necessarily want to make their first step in this journey walking through your front door, talking to somebody on the phone. They want to do their own discovery. That's why, hey, when somebody turns off their ads, we see their organic website visits go down and everything else. Well, yeah, because people want to go do their own research independent of your influence. So if you have an info packet, you can shape some of that, but you also have contact information. So now we can move people to the follow-up. And I know yesterday we talked about, Fred and Doug both talked about, like, the difference between follow-up from like a lead magnet to like a desire-based lead magnet or an information-based lead magnet versus one for an experience-based thing, like a trial. Well, we also have a bridge, right? Like, we provide something like Marketing Machine where there's a bridge where, okay, you get an info packet or you get a book. Now the next step is to move you to the trial. So there's a bridge there and then a bridge to the next step, right? And I think we want that because we want to get all the people in our local market at the various stages of the journey. Some people are going to be ready, and those are obviously the highest immediate value people to us. So we got to have the experiential thing. But then for the people who may not be ready in the moment, then we've got a book or an info packet. The other thing I listed here is a micro magnet, which is I think there are two ways to approach this, and I'll explain it. It's not something I've talked about a whole lot. I think I did one training on it a month or two ago. But too many people, I think, try to make their info, like their lead magnet, if it's not a book, they try to make it like a watered down book, right? It's like a lot of information, but it doesn't solve a problem. And my thought's pretty simple. If you're not going to do a book, then you're not going to do an info packet, or you can do this as a complement to those. Pick one of the 2 or 3 most prominent problems your people face and give them a quick solution, a quick fix. And what's great about this is with AI, you could even customize this pretty easily, right? Like, I'll show you how something like this can work with the personal profit pipeline GPT I have on the bottom of the page. I mean, you could go around and when you're doing your outreach, have different micromagnets for different types of audiences, right? Not dramatically different than what Joe was talking about with the different groups of people he speaks with. The offer, the invitation, the gift, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same for each person if you want to serve multiple verticals of people. But referral asks should be an all the time thing. I personally think outreach should be an all the time thing. I mean, a 10-minute sprint, 3 to 5 days a week of personal outreach to reconnect with former clients, to build relationships with local business owners where we can start to do some of that grassroots marketing, strategic alliances, fish bowls, all that fun stuff. Or just reaching out to people like we talked about with Kip yesterday, people that aren't aware of what you're doing now, right? Like there are hundreds of people that you've met along the way that at least are a little bit warmer of an audience than just putting stuff out on Facebook. And the fact that so many people want to skip over that group of people and say, I've got a couple hundred people on my phone, I've got 1,500 people on Facebook that know who I am, and I'm not inviting them to do things. I'm not sending them a gift. I'm not offering them help. But let's just put something out to the masses where people don't really know anything about us. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the connect piece of this, you got to have those in place, right? I mean, a clear front-end offer, a simple paid ad strategy, weekly organic outreach, lead magnets, referral asks. For convert, again, the things that we need to focus on, I think, having a very clear sales process. I mean, I put 45 to 60 minute consult with a script-based close and a Godfather offer, but basically you need a way to take somebody who walks through your door and consistently and systematically convert a meaningful percentage of them into paying clients. And still in this day and age, there are too many people who kind of just say, well, if I got them through the door, the experience will sell it, and I'm kind of haphazard about it, or I do it as an afterthought because I'm busy, I'm on the floor with clients, and so I ask them in between sessions, or I send them an email or a text message. If your goal was to add 50 new clients, it's probably worth sitting down with 75 to 100 people for 45 to 60 minutes and asking for a sale, asking them to partner with you to go to the next step. The Godfather offer, very simple. It's just a lever, right? Like it's just this thing to get people to decide now rather than say, no, I want to ride out the remainder of my 14-day trial. I want to ride out the remainder of my front-end offer. So we just want some sort of incentive for people to buy now. We talk about it a lot in boardroom. A lot of people use those. Heck, when I owned a health club, the Godfather offer was typically like, hey, we'll waive your enrollment fee. We'll give you this gym bag full of goodies. We'll give you all these other things. And even at that point, there was a nutrition software called VitaBot that would give them like a year membership to or something like that. And we did a similar thing with the personal training businesses where, there's some incentive for you to decide now rather than to go home and say, I'll think about it. And that, I think, just saying every person I come in contact with, I want that consult and I'm going to get better at it, instead of I don't have time, I'm quick to run through things. It is a difference maker, and I understand a lot of you may be doing this really well, but if the goal is, hey, I'm going to sit down with 2 people a week, and you sit down with 2 people a week and you get 1 yes a week, I mean, that piles up pretty quick. The next thing, when we're talking about focus, a multifaceted follow-up system. When I think multifaceted follow-up system, it's just email, text, phone. Don't just default to doing one. And we're just going to keep putting this in front of people. I know Doug talked about his, and you guys have access to that. Yesterday, Fred's follow-up system's 50 odd steps long, I think. So if you get a lead, the better you do with follow-up. Like the lead is the expense, right? It's the investment that we're like, the better our follow-up is, the better probability we get a positive ROI on the investment. And that's sunk, right? Like that's done. We've already got the lead. So every touch point you add, every bit of social proof that you have, every different channel that you integrate into this, the more effective this becomes. And what may start out is for every dollar I spend, I make back $1. You keep making these little tweaks, and then every dollar I spend, I make back $1.20, then $1.50, then $1.80, right? And I don't want to oversimplify or embellish this, but I mean, if you have the ability to say every dollar I spend turns into $3, it seems like a pretty good idea to do more of that, right? So if you haven't started to really dial in your follow-up system, again, if we're focusing, these are the things I would say, and check these boxes, then improve them, right? Optimize them. Like, you got to have them first, then we have to make them better. All right. The third is just having a systematic approach to transfer somebody from short-term membership, short-term program, short-term trial, whether it's free or paid, having this consistent process to move them into something that's a monthly recurring revenue program, whether it's open-ended or a 12-month commitment or whatever else. The number one priority on my side is there's a subscription, right? So if you sold 8-week summer memberships, we need to have a plan to move those people into recurring. So every time that you come up with one of these short-term programs, every time, I don't care if it's paid or free, part of your build isn't just, well, what am I going to have them do? How am I going to check in with them? It's how do I move them into a subscription-based program? What's the process look like? When do I start making that offer? What's the lever, the Godfather offer, the incentive look like? And ideally, it shifts back to a consult, right? Somewhere in this, you're building in that consultative selling opportunity where you sit down with them and you start to foreshadow and you start to talk about where they're headed, what their longer term goals are. Because if we sold them, this was one of the things when people were really heavy into 6-week challenges and they'd be mad that people left at the end of 6 weeks. I'm like, well, they came to you for 6 weeks and you sold them 6 weeks. That was the value exchange. And at no point in time that 6 weeks did you ever talk to them about what their annual goals look like. What was next? Where do they want to be in 6 months? Where do they want to be in 12, 18? And that way you can talk about how you work together then. Well, that needs to be part of what you do, right? You're the coach. You're the leader in this relationship as it relates to why they're with you. So it is incumbent upon you to move them from wherever they are, thinking short term, being focused in, hey, I just need to show up this week. I need to be consistent. You need to be able to paint this picture that is inspiring enough, motivating enough that they're like, okay, that's what I want. And it can be as simple as saying, well, hey, you know what? You've done awesome. You're doing great while you're here. Obviously, we've got 3 more weeks in this 8-week summer membership. I want to talk about where you want to be a year from now. What would be a dream come true result for you 12 months from today? And ask them and say, well, what do you feel like needs to happen for you to get there, or anything else you think needs to change? Okay, well, you need to be consistent. You need to do this. You need to do that. Great. Well, here's how we can do this together. I mean, it's a pretty simple process, right? And obviously, I'm shrinking it down for the context of this presentation, but dig deeper, get them to open up a little bit more. And especially if they bought something very quick, impulsively, where you didn't go into this deep diagnostic session, dig deeper and find out how they feel, what they've done in the past, what needs to happen, where they've encountered bottlenecks over time, and then you present your offer. And that needs to happen every time, because otherwise we have these Band-Aid solutions throughout the year, right? We sell these quick summer memberships, or we sell 28-day programs or a challenge or something like that, but we don't retain as many of them as we can. And so we're not building that recurring revenue base. All right. The fourth part of this focus is creating a world-class experience. I'm not going to delve into the programming side of this. I think that most of the people that we work with, that's been a passion point for them at some point, what that kind of piece of the deliverable is. But to be fair, most of them don't know much of anything about that. So we like it as an industry, but I mean, I'm guessing nobody went in the kitchen at Drake's yesterday and watched how things were cooked or drinks were made or whatever, right? Like, that's just not, like, people want an experience, people want an outcome. So we talked about the onboarding yesterday. Sometimes in a personal business, you can automate yourself right out of being personal. So make sure that you have human touch points, make sure that things that you really deeply feel need to be understood come in a conversation, and the emails or texts are designed to complement that, right? Give people some quick wins. I think that this is an underappreciated part of what most coaching does, right? Like, I think that most coaching, we want to talk, oh, this needs to be a lifestyle, you need to build these habits, whatever else. But I mean, you got to have buy-in. You got to have belief. And so getting people some quick wins, showing them that you've got some magic tricks up your sleeve, that they're going to feel good about this. And sometimes a quick win is just having a sense of accomplishment. I mean, I've said this many times over, like, people come to us because they want to feel better, right? They want to be happier. And there's this perception that I will be happier when I wear different clothing size, when I lose weight, when I can perform at this level in whatever activity I want to perform. Well, that may be true, but usually those things are like delayed gratification. Sometimes they can just be happier because they're in an environment where people care about them, they're rooting for them, they're celebrating their wins, they feel connected. All these things that people talk about, like being fundamental to like longevity, kind of matter here, right? Like your social circle and having a sense of purpose. I mean, every time somebody comes in to meet with you, and this has been kind of a pet peeve of mine for, I don't know, 15 years plus. Like, you'll hear a lot of people do stuff with no-shows, right? They'll follow up because they're worried about somebody quitting. Instead of catching people doing things right and celebrating that every time somebody walks through your door, they're making an investment in themselves. They should have a sense of accomplishment that they did something that the majority of people didn't do that day. And that should be complimented, commended. And we spend more time looking at that kind of gap from where we want them to be versus the gain from where they are versus where they started. And we need to celebrate the gain, right? Like, we need to celebrate how much ground that they've covered. And the more you do that, the better the chance they stick around, right? And it doesn't matter if we're talking about 50-year-olds or 15-year-old athletes, because in most of their lives, they are conditioned to say, this is what I need to do for everybody else, right? Even in like youth sports or high school sports or whatever else, it's like, I'm a part of a team. Little me, big team. Little me, big team. You'll see that on t-shirts all the time. Well, but that's okay. They should still feel important, right? They should succeed and in turn make the team better. So this holds true for adults, right? They're going to have a whole lot more people in their life professionally griping about this or that than they are having people saying, great job, I'm proud of you, I saw how well you did with this thing or that thing. So find quick wins. Sometimes it's just giving them a new skill and noticing it. Sometimes it's just celebrating their sense of accomplishment that they did something, but quick wins. Weekly progress and accountability, again, like those quick wins compound. Noticing that, keeping people on track. It's a whole lot easier to keep somebody on track than to get them back on track. And community events, personalized coaching touch points, I think of those as like episodic things. They're not an everyday thing, but the events, whether you go out and you offer opportunities, hey, we're going on a hike, or we're going to go out and celebrate something together, or personalized coaching touch points. I mean, yesterday it was talked about the handwritten notes, like doing some things that may not happen every week for this person. Like I can high five or fist bump somebody every week or every session, but periodic things that make you stand out so these people don't feel like they're just another face in the crowd. You layer that on top of good programming that produces results, and you've got something that's very different than what they're going to experience elsewhere. And then scale, building the team and the systems first. You can't do it alone. Nobody does it alone. The people that want to celebrate doing it alone, I've read books about $1 million solo business people and everything else, and in the book, they'll talk about how they're a solo this or that, and then they've got like 25 contractors, right? Nobody does it alone. You have your own unique set of skills, talents, experiences, passions. The more time you lean into that or develop the things that you want to be really good at, because frankly, most of us are bad at stuff before we're good at stuff. And you got to be willing to pour into it to get that. Well, it's not that you can't do all the other stuff. It's just that you can't do everything well and still like have time to come up for air, let alone have a life. So everybody needs help. First hire a coach or an admin. Honestly, like for years I said admin, in part because it was probably like the coaching time is just more valuable, right? Like I can make more money doing a one-on-one train. My logic was always very simple. It was like, I could train somebody one-on-one for an hour and make 75 or 85 bucks and buy a whole lot of admin time with that. I could buy 5 hours or 6 hours of admin time or whatever, right? Or if I'm buying VA time overseas, even more. But I mean, there's also the challenge that comes with coaching. Like good coaches are also kind of hard to find sometimes, right? And you can't admin your way in the Philippines to more coaching capacity. So I would tell you that I don't have as strong a feelings about it as I did before. It's just you have to get help or else you're going to paint yourself into a corner where it's like, I don't have any more time. I can't take any more clients. I don't have time to execute the marketing plan. And we talked yesterday, like they talked about the 1 hour a day marketing plan. If you find yourself in a spot where you don't have 1 hour a day to market and your revenue is still at this $7,000 to $15,000 a month, something's broken, right? Because we shouldn't be working that much and only making that amount of money and none of it be marketing, right? We've let everything expand into too much space. We've not created leverage. So get a first hire out. For people who are overwhelmed by systems, and I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Menachem, like one system a week or one system every 2 weeks. I know when we do scale, it's like one a week. And even one every 2 weeks if you're kind of up to your neck in responsibilities and obligations, but you're always gaining ground. I used to have this little kind of cadence because very early on, it's probably 2006, we had 4 local businesses and we're just starting to gain a little bit of ground in the online. So I was like, how do I keep making the local businesses better? And so first week of the month, there would be like the lead gen stuff. And I'd just do that for all the businesses. So I'd say, how do we optimize this? How do we improve that? Next week of the month, it would be like the sales, the conversion stuff. The next week we would do like delivery. The next week I didn't think about it as sales. I was like doing upsells, right? Like maximizing client value. And I just had this like cadence that I would just go through. And it might mean, okay, how do we get everybody at the end of for the upsell, everybody at the end of a training session to go and we do a smoothie bar, like go buy a smoothie after a training session, like have the trainer walk them there and do this. Like that might be the thing that we were teaching, but every week there was this kind of rhythm. So, I mean, I think the whole, how do you eat an elephant, right? Like that thing, it applies here too. If you look at, I need to have systems for my business as a whole, it will overwhelm you and you'll never gain any ground. But if you say, okay, this is the one thing that I'm going to install or optimize this week or over the next 2 weeks, and then you use that kind of win the week approach that we teach, you'll be fine. And then finally, set your 30-day or 6-week targets. I say that because I know that in Project 500, we do like the monthly meetings with what people are going to accomplish. We do 6-week cycles, pretty much. I run on 6-week cycles, IBA does, and have your numbers in place to track. So, to track them, you need a scoreboard. So a lot of this kind of rehashes what we talked about yesterday. But if you aren't where you want to be, like there are your fixes in each category. You shouldn't be thinking about anything outside of that until those are where they need to be foundationally, right? So I think there are kind of these 3 lanes to scaling up. Like you've got to raise your capacity. So have a team in place, have systems in place so you actually have time, or create leverage, right? Like if you're doing one-on-one, we're going to small group, right? We've got to raise our capacity. We've got to raise the value delivery, the perceived value, because this is all a value exchange, right? The same person that we say, well, they can't afford it, goes out here and has no problem spending that same amount of money at the mall or that same amount of money at dinner on the weekend or at a bar or whatever. We didn't create enough perceived value. So better experience and doing the things, the touch points we need for better retention. And then we got to raise our demand. We just need to do the things that we've already alluded to from a marketing standpoint. All right, so how do we kind of break this down and the focus finder here? So we got to define what we're trying to accomplish. Like I thought, Keith, 2 a week was a good, simple way to think about this, right? We need to know how many leads we need, how many conversion opportunities, how many people we need to sit down with, how many clients we need to close. These need to be very tangible, black and white numbers that we're shooting for every week. And that doesn't mean that every week is the same. I think sometimes we feel like every week's supposed to be the same, but I would say that if you're in Louisville, Kentucky for half of this week, your targets for this week are probably different than they would be the 3rd week of January. But every week there needs to be targets. So there's this, just make a copy of this and you've got a simple little grid. I'm sure you can make this prettier, put it on your own spreadsheet. But if it's important to you, it belongs on the schedule. The people that tell me, well, I just need to market or I'm going to do this or like they struggle because they'll put other people's priorities on their schedule for training sessions or whatever else, but they aren't putting their own. So schedule it, do a weekly debrief. We talk about on win the weeks. Hey, how did we do last week? 2 for 3, 3 for 3. So what moved the needle? Let's do more of that. What is slowing me down? Let's get rid of that. And then what's my number one priority next week to grow? And if you find yourself when you're on a win the week, or when you're doing your own kind of self-directed version of win the week, which ideally I would be on something live just because it gives you a deadline that you have to go show up and do. If you're not at $20,000 a month, I would say 45 weeks a year, your number one priority is a production thing. There are differences, right? Like there are definitely times that's not the case. You could have something rather pressing with a facility. You could have something rather pressing with a staff member, something like that. But most weeks, that's what we're doing to climb a little bit. And then if you just focus on getting the number of leads that we need, converting them, retaining them, and delegating. And these are imperfect numbers, but they're close. I mean, to be fair, I don't know that you need that many leads. Probably 25 or 30 is enough to hit the converting number. But I also think that I'd rather see you get more aggressive with lead generation, because that's usually a bottleneck for a lot of people. All right, so there are a couple fun little tools that I pieced together here that you can walk through: the personal profit pipeline GPT and the follow-up GPT. So personal profit pipeline, we've taught that for ages, and frankly, people use it about 2% as much as they should. And really all you have to do is follow the prompts here, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. But the neat thing about this is it'll tell you kind of if you give enough information, it'll tell you like a micro magnet to use, where you can customize something. If I'm reaching out to like 5 people today, it'll tell you like, hey, I put together this thing for you, this checklist, this cheat sheet or something. I put together this for you. So do you mind if I send it over? So now you're probably going to get a pretty good response, right? If people are feeling like you've been thinking about them and you're doing something for them, not asking something of them. So that's pretty good. It'll even kind of delve into the follow-up for you, but it makes that simple. It's not convenient for me to kind of walk through it now in this setting, but if anybody wants me to walk through it with a couple of you time or something later, I'm happy to. And then the follow-up, I think, is maybe even cooler, like, because it picks up where people are. Like if you say, okay, I want to pick up a conversation, I want to follow up with somebody. What was the last touch point? Did they download a lead magnet? Did they come in for a session? Whatever. And then do we want to invite them to something, i.e. make them an offer? Or are we just trying to kind of warm up the conversation? And it will give you a very simple kind of follow-up dialogue that you can use. So in both of these, a lot of times we get stuck at blank page, don't know what to say, don't know where to start. Both of these should help you. And again, if we go back to the organic stuff on the Connect unit, I mean, you should be able to use something like this and repeatedly have an easy path to reaching out to 5 people a day that are in your ecosystem in some way or another.